Hey guys, it's Lord of the Pogs. I'm going to try something a little bit different today. Generally, I work from a script, but today I'm going to ad-lib the whole place and we're going to see how it goes. Maybe it'll be great, maybe it'll be a flop. Who knows? But I like to try new things, so we're going to try this out. I live in Idaho and it's currently snowing, so you might hear some snowplows or snowblowers in the background. But today I want to talk about A Christmas Carol. Everybody knows the basic story of A Christmas Carol, and there's 100 different plays on it. There's Scrooged, starring Bill Murray. There's A Christmas Karen, which we just watched on Freebie last night, and it was actually really good. But the basic story is you've got Ebenezer Scrooge, or some mean-spirited, selfish person who hates Christmas, that gets visited by three spirits. Generally, the ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, and either the ghost of Christmas future or the ghost of Christmas yet to come, that show him the error of his ways. And then when he wakes up the next morning, he spins a 180 and becomes charitable, and everybody lives happily ever after. My preferred version is Mickey's Christmas Carol, which I saw for the first time when I was a boy, and that was my first introduction to A Christmas Carol. I'm 37 years old now, and to this day, Mickey's Christmas Carol is a staple for Christmas movies at our house. Perhaps the most important character in A Christmas Carol, which often gets overlooked, is Jacob Marley. In Mickey's Christmas Carol, Jacob Marley is played by Goofy, and the character is Ebenezer Scrooge's old business partner who shows up covered in chains and explains that he has to carry the burdens that he forged in his life now as chains, and that if Scrooge continues down that path, he's going to suffer the same fate. But then he leaves, and we're left to the devices of the three spirits. But Jacob Marley plays a much bigger part in the story than a lot of us realize. Before the events of A Christmas Carol, before Ebenezer Scrooge even entered the picture, there was Jacob Marley. Jacob Marley's full name is Jacob Thelonious Marley. His middle name, Thelonious, came from his grandfather, who was a hero. Thelonious Marley saved children from a burning orphanage, and in doing so, actually gave his own life. And so when Jacob Thelonious Marley was given his middle name, he used to introduce himself as Jacob Thelonious Marley because he took a lot of pride in having that as his namesake. Over time, he shortened it to Jacob T. Marley, and then eventually it just became Jacob Marley. Now, when Jacob Marley became educated, one of his instructors told him that he was the best mathematician that they had ever seen. And that became his new pride. He wanted to be the best. And when he started his counting house and started lending people money and renting out properties, he would take them for all they were worth, right down to the end. There was one instance where Jacob Marley rented a spot out to a husband and his pregnant wife. When the husband's work dried up and he couldn't pay the rent, he started selling off all his assets until there was nothing left. When there was nothing left, Jacob Marley went to their home and demanded payment. When they didn't have it, he said they needed to be out in 2 days. The husband pleaded with Jacob Marley and said, "My wife is pregnant. If you at least wait for the baby to come, that will give us enough time to make arrangements." And Jacob Marley said, "No, you either need to pay me everything that you owe right now, or you need to leave." And the wife took a pearl necklace off of her neck and gave it to Jacob Marley and said, "How much time will this buy us?" And he said, "This will buy you 1 extra day." So at the end of the next day, Jacob Marley showed up and kicked them out of their home. Sometime later, Jacob Marley was riding in his carriage and came up behind a funeral procession. Encountered a man who he asked, "What's going on?" And the man said, "This is a funeral procession for my sister." And the man identified himself as Ebenezer Scrooge. His sister Fan, if you're not familiar with this part of the story, Ebenezer Scrooge's sister Fan is the mother of Scrooge's nephew Fred, who in Mickey's Christmas Carol is played by Donald Duck, and Fan was apparently homeless and died from exposure. It's not clear, at least it's not clear to me, whether Fan died in childbirth or died from exposure after giving birth to Fred. But there they were. Ebenezer Scrooge identified himself to Jacob Marley, and they got to talking, and Scrooge told Marley that he worked at a counting house. And Marley said, well, I'm trying to expand my business. Why don't you come in tomorrow for an interview? When Scrooge showed up to the interview, he said to Marley, well, I'm not here to be an accountant for you. I'm here to be your partner. And Marley said, well, I don't need a partner. I need an accountant. And Scrooge said, okay, well, I don't need the job then, and started to leave. And Marley said, well, why don't you bring me your books so I can overlook your work, and then we'll make a decision. So Scrooge dropped off his work, and Marley brought Scrooge on as his new business partner. But there was still kind of a level of distrust between the two. So they made an agreement early on that each one would keep 10% of their profits and give 90% to the other. And eventually that would work its way down from 90-10 to 80-20. And eventually they would keep 50% of their own profits and give 50% to the other one. Kind of as a way to keep their distrust for each other in check. According to the original story, when Marley died, Scrooge was his sole mourner. Scrooge was physically the only one at Marley's bedside when he died, and it wasn't even because he cared about him, it was because he was waiting for Marley to die so that he could obtain his assets. And when Marley passed, he encountered apparently the spirits of everyone that he had ever taken money or property from and who had gone on to die, including the husband and wife that he had taken the pearl necklace from earlier. And without them even saying anything, he started defending himself, and he said, it was in our contracts, I had to do it. And in that moment, he realized that he didn't have to do it, he chose to do it. And as he was passing, before he had actually passed away, as he was passing, he tried to call out to Scrooge, Scrooge, I'm sorry, I forgive you. Please don't follow the same path that I did because you don't want this. But all Scrooge was able to hear was just some heavy breathing, which the doctor by Marley's bedside identified as his last breaths before he passed away. And when Marley fully crossed over, he didn't go to heaven or hell. He encountered a spirit who presented him with the chains that he later appeared to Scrooge wearing. The chains contained cash boxes and locks, some as big as his own head, unpaid receipts, old debts, and the spirits explained, you forged these chains link by link in life, now you have to wear them, and you have to wander the earth forever, and that is hell. Because he has to wander the earth forever wearing these chains that he forged in life, and he has to watch the consequences of his own actions. If he could have done something differently or should have done something differently, he sees that, but he doesn't have the opportunity to do it, and he might see somebody else do the things that he could have done or should have done in his lifetime. And he asks the spirit, is there anything I can do to save Scrooge? And the spirit says, you can go to Scrooge, but until Scrooge is ready to hear your message, he won't be able to see you or hear you. And Marley basically says, well, even if he sees me or hears me, why is he supposed to take my word for it? And he says, as soon as you are able to communicate with Scrooge, we will give you 3 spirits to back up your message. And those 3 spirits are spirits that we see in the story. The ghost of Christmas past, the ghost of Christmas present, and the ghost of Christmas yet to come. So Marley wanders the earth, following Scrooge back and forth from the counting house to his home and back again for 7 years. And that's when we encounter the events of A Christmas Carol as we know it. When Scrooge goes to the door and sees Marley in the door knocker, Marley just happens to be standing at the door. Over the course of these 7 years, Marley has come to see walls simply as a way to identify a space, not as a barrier that he had known during his lifetime. So he just happened to be standing at the door with his head appearing in the door knocker. He wasn't in the door knocker the way we oftentimes see it in the movies. He just happened to be standing there, and that's the first time that Scrooge was able to see him. In the movies, we often see that Marley tells Scrooge he'll be visited by 3 spirits tonight. In the original story, at least in the story that I read, Marley tells Scrooge that you will be visited by a spirit tonight, then you'll be visited by a second spirit tomorrow night, and you'll be visited by a third spirit the night after that. And the spirits tell Marley that if Marley is able to get Scrooge to change his ways and avoid the same fate that he did, that he will find redemption as well and get the chains taken off of him. And one of the things that the Ghost of Christmas Past takes Scrooge to see was Scrooge's old relationship with his flame, Belle. Belle and Scrooge were engaged when Scrooge went to interview with Marley the first time. At that time, Scrooge and Belle had started to drift apart anyway, but Marley convinced him to break off the engagement. Because marriage, this is from Marley's perspective, marriage doesn't yield any profit. In fact, it does the opposite, because Scrooge would have to take care of Belle, he would have to buy a bigger home for his family, he'd have to take care of kids. But if he broke off the relationship, then he could make more profit and keep more money for himself. So in the version of A Christmas Carol that I grew up on, Mickey's Christmas Carol, Belle, who's played by Daisy Duck, comes to Ebenezer Scrooge and basically says, have you made a decision on when you want to get married? And Scrooge says, yes, I have. Your last payment on the cottage was an hour late, so I've foreclosed. And Belle takes off. In other versions of A Christmas Carol, Belle is the one that breaks it off with Scrooge because he has his nose buried in his work all the time. So depending on the version of A Christmas Carol that you prefer, Scrooge breaks off the relationship with Belle, or Belle breaks off the relationship with Scrooge. But either way, Scrooge and Belle were engaged when Scrooge met Marley, and Marley was the one that talked Scrooge into breaking off their relationship. And that's a big reason why Marley felt so called to warn Ebenezer Scrooge about the errors of his ways so that he didn't face the same fate that he did, because he taught Scrooge so much of what he knew and the kind of person he became. So we always see Jacob Marley as kind of a secondary character who shows up, has a few lines, sets the story, and then leaves and we never see him again. But he really plays a bigger, more important part to the entire premise of A Christmas Carol, even setting up the whole story, than any of us realize. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a tip. And let me know in the comments what you thought of my ad lib. And don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and hit that little bell in the corner to get notifications on more videos like this one.